Yeah, well, you know what? I want to do everything I can to make this thing work, this new presidency work, and I think that
is
the
that
successful
your job?
model.
You just talked about
yeah, that's
being a
my
journalist.
job.
So
my
your
job is to help this country.
Is to make this presidency work.
To make this work successfully, because this country needs a successful presidency.
The way you would cover a president before Donald Trump is you would cover everything the president said. Barack Obama, Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, both Bushes. If they said something, you covered it. And they didn't say things every day.
You were dealing with an institution that functioned like an institution. They had messaging. They had officials that tried to stick to that message.
If the president didn't like something, he would say it.
In a more traditional administration, and that is both in the White House and in other parts of the administration, there's a lot more discipline. So even when people are leaking, they're leaking on behalf of their bosses.
We had a very tense relationship with the Obama administration. I never met President Obama the whole time I ran the New York Times' coverage of him, because I wanted to have a standoffish relationship with him. If there was a controversy, they called and complained. Sometimes they complained publicly.
And that's just not the case in the Trump White House.
The new normal, if you will, is that we have a president who really wants to undermine us. I think we have a president who attacks us in very vicious terms.
There are parts of it that try and function like institution, but at the very top, you know, we've seen time and again that he kind of makes his own decisions.
We're not used to presidents being so public in their distaste for the press. We're not used to presidents being so much on the attack and trying to undermine the credibility of the press. I don't mind the President of the United States criticizing us, but I think this president has gone farther than any others, and I think dangerously so.
So to all Americans in every city, near and far, small and large, from mountain to mountain, from ocean to ocean,
I thought in that moment that he had given a speech that was unlike any inaugural speech I had heard.
Hear these words: you will never be ignored again.
I think it hit me in that moment that this was going to be a different presidency, and it was going to be an amazing story. It has turned out to be an unbelievable story.
It just became clear to me after he won that he needed a punching bag, and after Hillary had been defeated, the press was going to be this new punching bag.
One of the challenges for us is to cover him not only as the President of the United States, but as a president who publicly says things that are false, and a president who also is still in business.
Keeping up is incredibly difficult. I feel endless sympathy for our readers.
This is a president who tweets several times in a day.
And there are often so many new characters kind of coming in and out, and new names, that it's hard to keep up with. Wake up Saturday morning and you see the president's tweeting about fake news and enemy of the people, and I mean, my first thought is, thank God I'm not one of the White House reporters, because their Saturday just got ruined. And then my second thought is, you know, at some point, how do you disengage from all this? It is incredibly difficult.
It's a little bit of a struggle to figure out how to cover a president when he says something and the lag time between his saying it and you're being able to prove that it's false.
We've fallen into a pace that is, I think, a bit more manageable for everyone. You know, there are still incredibly busy moments. I think the challenge now for a lot of journalists is to step back. Because every day there's some little tidbit of news, and you can grab it and you'll get a story out of it, and people will read it. But to really step back and kind of provide some context for readers, I think that's a real struggle now.
We do fact checks constantly now because he says things that are factually challenged, if you will. We've used phrases that I would never have imagined using in a newspaper. I mean, we used the word lie during the campaign. The simple fact that people around the president were willing to talk to Russia and accept dirt about Hillary Clinton is pretty remarkable.
The Trump White House, especially in its early days, was like a lot of guys trying to kind of win favor with the boss and put a knife in each other's backs. And so, you know, you would get a lot of people at the very top, in the middle, at the bottom, all very willingly going off the reservation to talk to me or many of my colleagues who actually cover the White House about a range of issues.
It's not just about the New York Times. It's not just about Trump. It's about an institution, the press, and our democracy, the essential role that it plays.
I mean, our view is we should cover him the way we've covered presidents before. We have to cover him aggressively and in a questioning way.
If we're fighting for anything, it's fighting for kind of a space in the middle where reasonable people disagree, where there's a central set of shared facts and shared ideas around which people discuss kind of the bigger policies and issues of the day. That space you've seen in the last year and a half has gotten smaller and smaller.
I don't mind if Donald Trump says, I don't like the New York Times' coverage. I don't mind if he criticizes stories. I do mind if he calls the press the enemies of the people.
They are. They are the enemy of the people.
Trump got me interested in Twitter again. Like, I think before he was elected, I was kind of like, been there, done that.
Twitter occupies a big space in the world of the journalists, for better and for worse. But, it also brings out the worst in everybody. Like Maggie Haberman, she's been attacked personally by Trump, and then also the people who go after her on Twitter do seem to go after her with a little more venom than her male counterparts.
Imagine a young president who comes in next, who grew up in a slightly different age. Will that person feel the need to tweet? I bet they will. I bet all presidents will do it. Hopefully not exactly the same.
It seems like it's an important tool to build an audience, but it really can trick people up.
In the beginning, we covered all of them. And in the beginning, we covered all of them as if they were big stories, because we'd never seen anything like it, and he was the president. I do think he sometimes uses it as a distraction, and I do think he sometimes uses it to float trial balloons. And once that became clear, I think we want to be a little more discerning how we cover them.
In a later episode, the New York Times, during the course that we're there, reiterates a policy that their reporters should really try to stay neutral on Twitter.
The New York Times and any news organization should speak with its reporting, especially the newsroom.
There have definitely been moments where I've teed up something and I'll say to a friend, I'll say, should I do this? And they're like, you should definitely not do that, and just delete it.
This is really the new frontier of free speech and our understanding of how to disseminate information while not letting hate run rampant. We haven't figured it out yet.
Oh, that's so funny. Look back there. The live red lights that turning those suckers off fast.
Journalism has become controversial, even though it really shouldn't be, but because the president is attacking them and saying that they're going after him with an agenda.
I have to admit, I don't love the concept of fake news, because there's always been made up news, right? What's different is his use of the phrase to undermine true and honorable reporting.
It's fake, phony, fake.
When the New York Times or the Washington Post or the New Yorker or Vanity Fair reports something true that he doesn't like, he calls it fake news. And that's a horrible precedent.
It almost feels childish, and instead of engaging about, okay, well, what is the thing that I'm reporting that's bothering you? Why do you think what we're doing is somehow wrong? Fake news shuts it down. So if we don't want to have a discussion, you're not real.
For me, being at the New York Times was it was the most incredible place to be. I felt like there was so much we didn't know, and when I was there and when I was around them, I felt like I was learning it. And I felt like I was just with people who could tell bullshit 10 miles away.
To assume that we're cynically kind of just out there trying to make things up because it'll get somebody paid, it completely misunderstands what we do and why we do it. And that hurts. That's hard sometimes to hear, but I also think it is this kind of dismissive way of just not engaging with people who are saying things you don't want to hear.
You can disagree, but if it's factually true, and the records of the major news organizations, the mainstream media, and reporting him factually is remarkably high. I mean, if somebody were to do an examination of the press's coverage of Donald Trump or any president, given how much stuff is published, we publish 200 stories a day. So to undermine that by calling it fake news and saying it's false is bad for the press, it's bad for the presidency, and it's bad for the country.
The president's rhetoric has a tremendous amount of power to sway opinion. What leaders say matters. And so when somebody goes out and says fake news, there's a segment of the population that no matter what you do is going to believe that you are somehow dishonest and trying to kind of make things up or make somebody look bad.
We went through a period where we sort of lost our mojo a little bit. We were losing audience. We couldn't figure out what the right economic model was. We're starting to figure that out. The best news organizations like the Times and the Post have suddenly gained audience.
I think what we can do is better explain how we do our jobs. Let people know the process as much as possible so they can see how we build a news story.
As I've said, I think the press and the government should always have a little bit of a tense relationship. For better or worse, it's a little more tense now. And one of my concerns, of course, is that when he starts attacking us for his fake news, people won't believe what we have to say. That's difficult. That's the most difficult part.
It's a phrase that feels like it's from, Stalin. I mean, it's so violent, really, to call the media the enemy of the people.
When you go around calling the press the enemy of the people, some people are going to hear that and think it's okay to go out and hurt these people. And when leaders say it, we've seen it in the Soviet Union, we saw it in Nazi Germany. This is a phrase that is meant to create an other, people who are not like you. They're not part of this. You don't need to treat them with respect or humanity because they are enemies. And that's a very dangerous phrase.
If he keeps attacking all of the institutions that question him, that's really bad for the democracy.
Without the press, without an independent body looking for truth, you really can't deliver freedom to a populace. They don't know what they're voting for. They don't know who they're electing. So it's a reminder of how essential the press is in a functioning democracy.
The democracy is supposed to be, a cacophonous fight amongst various forces. It's supposed to be messy. I don't think it was supposed to be this messy, though.
Well, and I think that the dangerous, edges here are that he's trying to undermine the media, trying to make up his own facts. And it could be that while unemployment and the economy worsens, he could have undermined the messaging so much that he can actually control exactly what people think. And that is our job.
Yeah.